Good morning, everyone. Nice to see all of you, many familiar faces. I was just here a couple weeks ago, so I'm happy to be back. I love being in Trabuco. I begin with what I consider a hidden gem from the complete works of Swami Medhananda, who's the founder of our monastic order. Once I set the topic for today's talk, Clowns Tumbling, I asked different monks and different people, can you catch the reference? Actually, I'm curious among you, how many of you can catch the reference? A couple monks did, but apart from a few monks, almost nobody was able to catch the reference, because it's a little tricky. The passage is buried in the 9th volume of the complete works, and it was a late discovery. It wasn't included in the original complete works, but Marie Louise Burke, in her New Discoveries, this brilliant work, research work she did, she discovered this beautiful conversation that Swami Medhananda had with an American woman named Miss Bell. So let me read to you this conversation. It's brief, and it forms the theme of today's talk. The place is Camp Taylor, California. The time is May 1900. Miss Bell. This world is an old schoolhouse where we come to learn our lessons. Swami Medhananda. Who told you that? Miss Bell could not remember. Well, I don't think so. I think this world is a circus ring in which we are the clowns tumbling. Miss Bell. Why do we tumble, Swami? Swami Medhananda. Because we like to tumble. When we get tired, we will quit. This passage might seem like he's just being witty, facetious, but it's very profound. And I think that this passage rewards close reading, reflection, meditation, and practice. More importantly than anything else, practice. If we can practice what he's saying here, we don't need anything else. We'll be enlightened. That's my proposal. What's interesting is Swamiji himself, Swami Medhananda, teaches the schoolhouse model. The thing that he's saying, I don't believe that, right? The thing that Miss Bell is talking about. He sometimes will talk about it. One example is one of my favorite statements of his. He says, the secret of life is not enjoyment, but education through experience. So he fully believes that this is a world where we come to learn certain karmic lessons, existential lessons, so that we can grow morally and spiritually. That's a very important part of his teachings, in fact. In another place he says, this world is a great gymnasium in which you and I and millions of souls must come and get exercises and make ourselves strong and perfect. This is what it is for. So in these kinds of statements, he sounds a bit like Miss Bell, right? But I think that what Swamiji is saying in this conversation with Miss Bell is that all of that's true, but it's a lower truth. It's necessary for us as spiritual aspirants. But at some point, we need to evolve further to the highest spiritual standpoint. So we have to distinguish standpoints here. First of all, in Vedanta, there's no such thing as sin. We have to remove that word from our vocabulary. People who are raised in other traditions might be taught that we shouldn't sin, sinning is bad, we're all sinners, original sin, these kinds of things. But Vedanta says there's no such thing as sin. There are mistakes, but there are no sins. We make mistakes, we have stumbles, but we learn from those mistakes and we learn from those stumbles. Sri Ramakrishna, the guru of Swami Medhananda, he used to say, if you eat a chili, won't your tongue burn? We learn our lessons that way. But this, Swamiji is saying in this very profound conversation he had with Miss Bell in 1900, this is just 2 years before he left his physical body. That's a lower truth. And the higher spiritual standpoint, from this highest spiritual standpoint, even our mistakes, even our stumbles turn out to be tumbles, clownish tumbles, tumblings. That's the higher truth. Everything here is mother's play. And we are mother's playmates. As I said, this is not just an offhand, witty kind of remark. This is based on his own spiritual experience. In one of my favorite letters that he ever wrote, he says, this is a letter to Francis Leggett whom he called frankincense, playfully. He gave it an amazing nickname, frankincense. So, dear frankincense, from 6th July 1896, he says, some days I get into a sort of ecstasy. I feel that I must bless everyone, everything, love and embrace everything. And I do see that evil is a delusion. I am in one of these moods now, dear Francis, and am actually shedding tears of joy at the thought of you and Mrs. Leggett's love and kindness to me. I bless the day I was born. For what am I? What was I ever? But a tool in his hands, for whose service I have given up everything, my beloved ones, my joys, my life. He is my playful darling. I am his playfellow. There is neither rhyme nor reason in the universe. What reason binds him? He, the playful one, is playing these tears and laughters over all parts of the play. Great fun, as Joe says. Joe is Josephine MacLeod, a friend of his. It is a funny world, and the funniest chap you ever saw is he, the beloved infinite. Fun, is it not? Brotherhood or playmatehood, a school of romping children let out to play in this playground of the world, isn't it? Whom to praise? Whom to blame? It is all his play. They want explanations, but how can you explain him? He is brainless, nor has he any reason. He is fooling us with little brains and reason, but this time he won't find me napping. I have learnt a thing or two. Beyond reason and learning and talking is the feeling, the love, the beloved. I, Sake, fill up the cup and we will be mad. Yours ever in madness, Vivekananda. It's a wonderful letter. Some of these letters, you get insight into a completely different side of Swami Vivekananda's personality in his letters, which you don't get when he's giving his public lectures, which are amazing in their own right, but very different. Here you get something very personal, and it's more devotional and more playful and more fun, more off the cuff. In fact, he would often say that he would tell Nivedita toward the end of his life, he said, Ramakrishna, his guru, was all bhakti, devotion on the outside, but all jnana, knowledge on the inside. And I am all knowledge on the outside, but all bhakti on the inside. In the same letter, actually, I should have started with this, but he says, at 20 years of age, I was a most unsympathetic, uncompromising fanatic. I would not walk on the footpath on the theater side of the streets in Calcutta. At 33, I can live in the same house with prostitutes and never would think of saying a word of reproach to them. Is it degenerate? Or is it that I am broadening out into the universal love, which is the Lord himself? He's talking about his own spiritual evolution. It's remarkable. At the age of 20, he was deadly serious about spiritual life. He thought in terms of black and white dichotomies, good and evil. People fell into one of these two categories. He himself fell into one of these two categories. He was very hard on himself. And because he was hard on himself, he was hard on others. That's often what happens. We judge others harshly when we judge ourselves harshly. And we fail to be compassionate and loving toward others when we're not compassionate and loving toward ourselves. But what a change of perspective. 13 years later, he's 33. His entire perspective changes, and he sees everything as mother's play. He no longer thinks of things, looks at this world in terms of good and evil. Everything is good. All is good, because all is God. God is our playful darling. Evil is a delusion. So that's the real test in spiritual life. The closer we come to God, the more we should feel that joy, that love. And we won't judge ourselves, we won't judge others. Also notice this wonderful statement of his. He says, he, the playful one, is playing these tears and laughters over all parts of the play. Great fun, great fun. Non-duality. There's nothing but Divine Mother. It's nothing but the divine. Playing as you and you and you and me and the lectern. Everything animate and inanimate in this world is just the play of Mother. There's nothing but Mother. And when we realize that, all these categories of good and evil, good and bad, they disappear. Joy and suffering. There's only mother playing. He would often say this toward the end of his life. In a letter from 1900, he says, I am mother's child. She works. She plays. Why should I plan? What should I plan? Things came and went just as she liked without my planning. We are her automata. She is the wire puller. I think if we keep this perspective in mind, it'll completely revolutionize our outlook on spiritual life. Because I think one of the biggest problems in spiritual life, especially when we first take to spiritual life, we take it too seriously. And we take ourselves too seriously. And what he's encouraging us to do is to start to laugh at ourselves. To learn to laugh at ourselves, at this world. Not take ourselves so deadly seriously. And when we do that, we don't judge ourselves so harshly. Spiritual life becomes joyous. It becomes fun. You know, our scriptures, they often say spiritual life is difficult. One of the famous statements is from Katha Upanishad. Kshurasya dhara nishita duratya durgam patastat kavayo vadanti, which means spiritual life is like walking on the edge of a razor's blade. Some of you might be familiar with a novel written by W. Somerset Maugham. It's called The Razor's Edge. And he's alluding to that mantra from the Katha Upanishad. It is hard, but there's a real danger in going too far to the extreme of thinking that spiritual life is hard. Because then we get down, then we're always going to have a sour expression on our face. And Swami Vivekananda used to say, religion is not for dyspeptics. If you're a real spiritual aspirant, you shouldn't walk around as if you have some kind of ailment. You should be happy. There should be a smile on your face. The real predicament that a lot of spiritual aspirants find themselves in is the following. They're surrounded by two kinds of people. One is worldly people. The vast majority of people, very worldly people, they're just enjoying life, right? They seem to be, at least. And the spiritual aspirant is deprived of those joys. I'm not going to do those things that they're doing. I'm not going to have the fun that they're having. And on the other hand, they're inspired by the lives and teachings of saints, great saints, who are in constant bliss and joy. But that's because they're enlightened. And so these spiritual aspirants are stuck in between. They fall through the cracks. They're depriving themselves of all those worldly joys and pleasures that most people around them and their friends and their loved ones that they're having. And yet they're not enlightened. And so they're not getting the bliss. They're not enjoying the taste of divine bliss, the bliss of enlightenment. They're stuck in between. And what do they have? Spiritual life becomes a drudgery. Sometimes it becomes mechanical. And you start to think sometimes, you start to internalize this idea that spiritual life is about sucking all the fun out of your life. And it can be depressing. And it's not true. That's the argument I want to make today. The two Sanskrit terms here are yoga and bhoga. So yoga means spiritual practice and bhoga means worldly enjoyment. And we think that if we're engaging in yoga, spiritual practice, then we have to give up all bhoga. In a sense, it's true, but we have to understand in what sense. And it's really important to keep in mind that if you're really leading a good spiritual life, there should always be a smile on your face. And you should always be having fun. Okay? There are some spiritual traditions that actually say the opposite. Spiritual life means you shouldn't be having fun. I mean that literally. So I'll give you a couple examples. In medieval Christian monastic traditions, for instance, laughter, smiling sometimes even, are condemned as inimical to spiritual life. The step 10, so Saint Benedict has a work called Ladder of Humility. And step 10 is, don't laugh. Step 11, don't joke. The monastery of Saint Columbanus Hibernus has the following punishments. This is a direct quote. He who smiles in the service 6 strokes, so physical, corporal punishment. If he breaks out in the noise of laughter, a special fast, unless it has happened pardonably. No laughing, no joking, no fun. because it's all anti-spiritual. Traditional Buddhism, in the Uposatha Sutta, they say the noble ones, the true spiritual aspirants, the best spiritual aspirants, they've given up singing and dancing, the playing of musical instruments, and the watching of entertainments, which are stumbling blocks to that which is wholesome. And in the traditional monastic codes for Buddhists, in the Buddhist Vinayas, they make similar statements, and they say that you should not be enjoying music in any form, because they connect music with sensual pleasure. So it seems to me that these prohibitions that you find in medieval Christianity, in traditional Buddhism, that you can trace these views, these negative attitudes toward fun, toward joy, toward music, to their respective worldviews. Because what's the first noble truth of Buddhism? Sarvam dukkham. Everything is unsatisfactory. Everything is suffering. That includes music, that includes singing, fun. Christians, this world is a vale of tears. So if you're having joy, that means you're enjoying the world too much, and you shouldn't be doing that. What does Vedanta say about the world? The Upanishads say again and again, everything, instead of saying everything is dukkham, everything is suffering, the Upanishads say everything is Brahman. Sarvam kalvidam Brahman. Everything is divine. There's nothing but the divine. In the Mundaka Upanishad, there's a wonderful mantra. It's an extraordinary, ecstatic, spiritual experience. Brahmaivedam amritam purastad Brahma paschad Brahma dakshinashchotarena adhaschodhvam cha prasutam Brahmaivedam vishvedam varishtam. It means Brahman is above me, Brahman is below me, Brahman is to my left, Brahman is to my right. Everywhere I look, there's nothing but the divine. Gita says, Vasudevaha sarvam iti samahatma sudurlabhaha. The great souled one, who is hard to find in this world, is the one who sees God, the divine, in everything and in everyone. Sri Ramakrishna, he used to say the same thing. He would say that when you're climbing up to the roof of a house, you have to leave the steps behind one by one. And in that stage of spiritual practice, you have to engage in neti vichara, which means not this, not this. Nothing in this world is God. At some point, you have to go through this phase. And so you reject and you renounce until you reach the roof. And he says that's jnana. And he says when you attain knowledge of Brahman, your own nature, your own true nature as non-dual pure consciousness, and you come back to this world, you look at this world as a dream, as a kind of illusion, as a mirage in a desert. But then he says there's a further and greater spiritual experience, which he calls vijnana. And he says the person, after reaching the roof, will look back on that same staircase that he had just climbed. And then he says, wait a minute, but the stairs, the steps are made of the same material as the roof. Bricks, lime, and brick dust. He says the Vijnani realizes that Brahman has become the 24 cosmic principles. Divine Mother has become everything. And that divine reality, which is nirguna, impersonal, attributeless, which you realize as your true essence once you reach the roof, is equally Shakti, Divine Mother, playing as everything in this universe. Vedanta, how does Vedanta define God? Taittiriya Upanishad, that same Upanishad that I read from in the beginning of this talk, gives a very succinct and very powerful definition of God. Raso vai saha. The divine is rasa. The term rasa in Sanskrit has many different nuances and connotations. It's very difficult to translate, but I'll try to give you a sense of it. It has connotations of bliss, joy, fun, humor. In Indian languages, rasa also means humor, being witty, sweetness. All of this is conveyed in this one small word, rasa. God is rasa. God is fun. God is joy. God is bliss. In Vedanta, God is Satchit Ananda. Ananda, it means existence, consciousness, bliss. Ananda means bliss. God is the essence of bliss. Taittiriya Upanishad says, Anando Brahmeti Vijanat Anandadhyeva kalvimani bhutani jayante anandena jatani jivanti anandam prayantavi samvishanti. Bliss indeed is Brahman. From bliss all beings are born. By bliss they exist. To bliss they return. This is God in Vedanta. Sri Ramakrishna, he was not educated in a traditional way. He dropped out of school at the age of 6. And so many people, even some monks, they think he didn't know the scriptures well. But I think that's a serious mistake. Because he had an incredible memory, and pandits would visit him frequently, different scholars of different traditions, and they would recite scriptures to him. And he would remember everything. So he was aware of this wonderful definition of Brahman, of the divine, as Rasa in Taittiriya Upanishad. And he mentions it. I'll read this. This is from the Gospel. He says, mere pandits, devoid of divine love, talk incoherently. Pandit Samadhyayi once said in the course of his sermon, God is dry. Make him sweet by your love and devotion. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, imagine to describe him as dry, whom the Vedas declare as the essence of bliss. He's referring to this definition of Taittiriya Upanishad. Rosh Swarup in Bengali, Rasa Swarupa, God is Rasa Swarupa, is of the essence of Rasa. And this Pandit is calling God dry, that we have to add bliss to God. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, it makes one feel that the Pandits didn't know what God really is. That was why his words were so incoherent. A man once said, there are many horses in my uncle's cowshed. From that, one could know that the man had no horses at all. No one keeps a horse in a cowshed. Thank God, God has a sense of humor. God is fun, by definition. In his essence, he is joy and fun and bliss. So we should never feel guilty if we're having fun as spiritual aspirants. And one of the things I love most about the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, many of you I'm sure have looked at least parts of it, is that he's constantly joking. One of the refrains that comes up again and again on almost every page is, everybody laughs. Shokoler hasho, everybody laughs. And he's cutting jokes constantly with these young men and women. One of my favorites, there are a lot, and I've given a whole talk called Sri Ramakrishna's Jokes, so you can look that up if you're interested. But I want to share with you one of my favorite jokes that he tells. So the context here is he's giving these very lofty spiritual teachings about the inseparability of Brahman and Shakti. And then Bunkim, who's a famous Bengali writer, and his friends, they begin to whisper to each other in English, which is a language that Sri Ramakrishna didn't know, about what Sri Ramakrishna had just said. And so Sri Ramakrishna, smiling to Bunkim and others, well, gentlemen, what are you talking about in English? Adhar, we are discussing what you have just said. Sri Ramakrishna, smiling. That reminds me of a funny story. It makes me want to laugh. Once a barber was shaving a gentleman. The gentleman was cut slightly by the razor. At once he cried out, damn! And he's using it. Sri Ramakrishna didn't know English, but he used a few English words. So one of the few English words he knew and used was damn, D-A-M-N. But the barber didn't know the meaning of the word. He put his razor and other shaving articles aside, tucked up his shirt sleeves, it was winter, and said, you said damn to me. Now you must tell me its meaning. The gentleman said, don't be silly, go on with your shaving. The word doesn't mean anything in particular, but shave a little bit more carefully. But the barber wouldn't let him off so easily. He said, if damn means something good, then I am a dam, my father is a dam, and all my ancestors are dams. All laugh. But if it means something bad, then you are a dam, your father is a dam, and all your ancestors are dams. All laugh. They are not only dams, but damn to damn. Loud laughter. And you might think, this is a saint? This is God himself? But yes, because God is the essence of joy and fun. It's wonderful. He would have gotten, 20 lashes for this if he was in a medieval Christian monastery. Since God is rasa, since God is fun, the essence of fun, we express our own innate divinity by being joyful, by having fun. I joined as a monk in India, actually. I finished my PhD and then I got a one-way ticket to India back in 2009. And I went to Belur and I joined at a university run by our order, which was called Vivekananda University at the time. So I joined there. And because I'm an American, I'm more health conscious than some of the other people there. So I was thinking about how do I continue to jog in this ridiculous heat. So I'd wake up at 3:10 in the morning, do my morning meditation at 4 in the morning, and by around 5:15, I'd go to a little indoor track kind of thing, and I'd jog before the sun came up. And I would sometimes run into this monk who would also do some morning exercise, some walking. And we never really talked, but he would always ask me one thing in Bengali, one question every time I saw him. Anande acho to? Which means, are you in Ananda? Ananda is the same word. The definition of Brahman is Ananda in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Are you joyful? Are you happy? Are you having fun? That's the only question he would ask me. And I loved it. Because there were so many, when you join in India especially, every monk is going to be asking you things like, are you getting up in the morning? You're doing your meditation? You're doing this? You're doing that? They'll scold you. But this, are you having fun? That's what he kept asking me. A couple years later, he left his body. But I always remembered that. The current president of our order, most revered Gautamanandaji Maharaj, he's a wonderful, inspiring monk. Always has a smile on his face. And sometimes he's asked, how is it that you never seem depressed, never seem tired, never seem unhappy? He told a story. When he was a brahmachari, when he was a novitiate, there were a group of brahmacharis speaking to Swami Yatishwaranandaji, a great monk of our order. And Yatishwaranandaji asked this group of young men, these novitiates, do you know how to remain always in a cheerful mood? And nobody could say anything. They didn't know. He said, memorize a few lines of a good song or a good poem. And he gave an example, a Bengali poem, a Bengali song. Ma jar anandamoy she ki niraronde thake, ihokale porokale ma thake anande rakhe. Ma take anande rakhe. How can the children of ever blissful mother not be blissful and joyous? Mother keeps them in bliss both here and in the hereafter. So we should always remember that. Speaking of which, a couple of years ago, I came to Hollywood a little over 2.5 years ago, and shortly thereafter, I decided it'd be fun to start a Vedanta hiking group. So I started a Vedanta hiking group, and I bring groups of people to different hikes. And the last one was last Saturday, actually. It was a group of almost 30 people. And I took them to, this is a cue, by the way, for the person manning the camera to pull this slide. I'll show you some pictures. That's fun, too. I took this group of about 30 people to Echo Mountain. And for us, in our tradition, Echo Mountain is a holy place. And going there is a holy pilgrimage because Swami Medhananda, back in 1900, he visited Echo Mountain. At the time, there was a hotel, there was an observatory, which has since been destroyed. But he visited. And so I took them, and it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. And it's a tough hike. It's 13 miles. But everybody had smiles on their face the whole time. And it's a 6.5 mile steep climb up until you get up to Inspiration Point. And okay, now I can't see the pictures, so I was going to walk you through them, but now it's going to be harder for me. But anyway, of these 5 pictures, a couple of them you'll see are us hiking, posing. And then toward the end, I think maybe the 4th and 5th pictures are our spiritual program. We held a 1-hour spiritual program at the top, at Inspiration Point, where we had a half hour of meditation, where we did some chanting, where we did some singing. It was all really amazing, and everyone had a blast. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the infinite expanse of nature, whether you're looking at the infinite sky, the infinite ocean, the sublimity of nature, it reminds us of the infinite divine. And that's the feeling that we all had as we were doing this hike. So I do a few hikes a year. You should join us. A few of you, if you're interested, you can join us. And beyond that, if you might ask, well, how is a hike spiritual? It's spiritual in so many ways. How is it not spiritual? You're communing with nature. And again, everything depends on your attitude, right? And so internally, what are you doing? You can be repeating a mantra. That itself becomes a spiritual practice if you're doing that. You're also pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, right? Especially these more challenging, arduous hikes. And you're taxing the body, taxing the mind. It's a kind of austerity, right? More deeply, since everything is divine, the same Upanishad I keep coming back to, Taittiriya Upanishad, it talks about the 5 Atmas. Many times when Vedantic preachers talk about these 5 Atmas, they actually talk about the 5 Koshas. Kosha means sheath. And what's significant is that, you can take it down, yeah, or take it up. The sheaths, the word sheath never comes up in the entire Upanishad. The words that come up, there are 2 words that come up in that context. Atma, which means self, and Purusha, which also means self. So what the Taittiriya Upanishad teaches is that we have 5 levels of self, or 5 states of self or consciousness. And it explains Annamaya, the physical level, Pranamaya, the vital level, Manomaya, the mental level, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, ultimately is the Anandamaya, the self of bliss. And what the Upanishad says is, everything is bliss, everything is divine. Even the physical body is divine. Our feelings are divine. Our mind is also divine. So we should strive to manifest our divinity at all levels of being. We shouldn't neglect the body, we shouldn't neglect those things. So that's another reason why things like hiking, physical activities, are a way of expressing and manifesting our divinity. In fact, most of you probably don't know this, but in our sannyasa ceremony, which means when we take our final monastic vows, after 9 or 10 years in the order, one of the first mantras is from the Upanishad. It's Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak Pranaschakshu Shrotramatho Balamindriyani Cha Sarvani. It's a prayer to the divine for physical strength. Strengthen all of our muscles, all of our limbs. Strengthen our senses so that we can see, that we can hear everything. You might be surprised, but it makes perfect sense if you understand the Upanishads properly. And you don't think of this body as an evil or as something unreal or something to be avoided, but as an instrument of God and as a means of manifesting our own divinity. At the same time, so I've been saying we should have fun in spiritual life, but there are different ways of having fun. The Isha Upanishad, in the very first mantra, teaches us the right way to have fun. So let me recite to you this beautiful opening mantra of the Isha Upanishad. Om Isha Vasyamidag Sarvayat Kincha Jagatyan Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunji Thamagrida Kasya Svidhanam. There's a kind of chanting style. You can notice that, right? There's 3 pitches. I teach a Vedic chanting class in Hollywood, and people are having fun with that as well. The translation. This is a rough paraphrase of Swami Vivekananda's own translation of this first mantra of the Isha Upanishad. Whatever exists in this universe is to be covered with the Lord. Enjoy this universe of God by giving up desires. So let's parse this a bit, this mantra, because it's very dense and profound. Swami Vivekananda, he gave a lecture called God and Everything, and the whole lecture is a meditation on this Upanishad, the Isha Upanishad. He says, here I can only lay before you what the Vedanta seeks to teach, and that is the deification of the world. The Vedanta does not in reality denounce the world. It really means deification of the world. Giving up the world as we think of it, as we know it, as it appears to us, and to know what it really is. Deify it. It is God alone. We read at the commencement of one of the oldest of the Upanishads, meaning this one, the Isha Upanishad. Whatever exists in this universe is to be covered with the Lord. We have to cover everything with the Lord himself, not by a false sort of optimism, not by blinding our eyes to the evil, but by really seeing God in everything. That's the highest realization. that this entire world is mother's play and that we're her playmates. Shankara, the great 8th century champion of Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual school of Advaita, he's in trouble here. He has trouble interpreting this mantra in the Upanishad, and actually the Upanishad as a whole, for various reasons. Because the first line says that this entire world should be covered with God, with the Lord. First of all, God for Shankara's school is a lower reality. It's only true from the standpoint of ignorance because it implies dualism between devotee and God. And so he interprets God here, Isha, as Atman, as the impersonal supreme self. And he says, what this line is teaching us to do is to cover this unreal world of names and forms with the supreme Atman, which is the only reality, which is our true nature. And he goes so far as to liken this entire world with the beautiful Christmas tree and all these names and forms as a bad odor. And he says we should cover that bad odor. We need an air freshener. So let's use the air freshener of the Atman to cover the bad odor of this world with all its names and forms. But what does Sri Ramakrishna say? He's once asked point blank, is the world unreal? He answers, why should the world be unreal? That is the view of Advaitic Jnanis, followers of the path of knowledge, followers of Shankara. After realizing God, one sees that it is God herself who has become the universe and all living beings. This is the standpoint of the Isha Upanishad. There's nothing but God. This is how Swami Medhananda, following his guru, Sri Ramakrishna, interprets this Upanishad. And the second line, the phrase that's really startling here and provocative, Tena tyaktena bhunjitaha. Tena tyaktena bhunjitaha. Very tricky phrase. Because I was telling you earlier, there are two terms in Sanskrit, yoga and bhoga. Yoga is spiritual practice. Bhoga is enjoyment, typically understood as worldly enjoyment. Now this Upanishad in the first mantra is telling us to enjoy. Bhunjitaha is the same word as bhoga. It's the same root word, bhuj. Enjoy. Our great scriptures are telling us to enjoy this world, and Shankara is scandalized. He says it cannot be. I won't allow it. So even though he's very faithful to Panini, who is the great Sanskrit grammarian, he has to twist the grammar here. And he says, the word bhunjitaha, even though it seems to mean enjoy this world, in fact we have to take it to mean something totally different, protect. The Upanishad is telling us to protect something. What? And then he has to supply the word because it's not mentioned, because it doesn't mean protect really. So he says, what the Upanishad is telling us to do is to protect the Atman, protect the self through renunciation. But if you just take it literally, Swami Medhananda, he says, it literally means to enjoy this world. Enjoy the world tena tyaktena, through renunciation. Not by renouncing the world, but by renouncing that little I, that little ego, that little self with its petty likes and dislikes, its petty desires. That's what needs to be renounced. It's an inner renunciation. Once you can do that, you can really start having fun. And you can enjoy this world, seeing nothing but divine bliss everywhere and in everyone. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the Jnani, the follower of Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, they'll look at this world as an illusion, as a dream. He says the Vijnani will look at it as a mojar kuti, as a mansion of bliss and fun and joy. Swami Medhananda, when he was in the West, he met some famous people. One of them was a scientist named Ingersoll. And Ingersoll tells Swami Medhananda, they have a debate actually about how best to have fun and how best to enjoy the world. Ingersoll gives him his theory. Ingersoll says, I believe in making the most out of this world, in squeezing the orange dry, because this world is all we are sure of. Swami Medhananda replies, I know a better way to squeeze the orange of this world than you do, and I get more out of it. I know I cannot die, so I am not in a hurry. I know there is no fear, so I enjoy the squeezing. I have no duty, no bondage of wife and children and property. I can love all men and women. Everyone is God to me. Think of the joy of loving human beings as God. Squeeze your orange this way and get 10,000-fold more out of it. Get every single drop. This is a very simple way of explaining the Ishopanishad. Tena tyaktena munjitaha. You can only really, truly enjoy this world and really have fun if you see God in everything and everyone. That's what this first mantra is telling us. That's true enjoyment. We don't need to renounce the world, but we should look at it as God, and then we can really have fun. Sri Ramakrishna, in another place in the Gospel, he says, a mere jnani, a follower of the path of knowledge, is a monotonous person, boring. That person always analyzes, saying, it is not this, this world is like a dream. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, but I have raised both my hands, therefore I accept everything. And he tells an amazing story. And I'm just going to paraphrase it. There are two weaver women. By profession, they're weavers. And one weaver woman invites the other to her house. They're having a nice time, chatting. And this weaver woman says, let me get some refreshments. So she steps out of the room. In the meantime, this other weaver woman sitting at this table looks at this really beautiful ball of yarn of her friend's. And she gets a little envious. And so she looks around to make sure her friend's not watching. She steals it, sticks it under her armpit. But the friend notices this. She was coming back at the time, so she noticed that she's hiding with this ball of yarn under her armpit. She comes up with a plan. With a smile on her face, she says, I'm feeling great, aren't you? Let's go dance. Let's dance together. So the friend's like, uh-oh. So she gets up, all right, puts on the music, they start dancing. And the weaver friend whose house it is, she's dancing with both hands raised, really having, going to town, really enjoying herself. The other friend, like this. She's hiding that ball of yarn. She can't raise both hands. So the weaver woman says, how is this, friend? Why should you dance with only one hand raised? Dance with me raising both hands. Look at me. See how I dance with both hands raised. But the guest still pressed one arm to her side. She danced with the other hand raised and said with a smile, this is all I know of dancing. It's very profound. This might seem like a funny story. It's very, very spiritually profound. Sri Ramakrishna gives the lesson. I don't press my arm to my side. Both my hands are free. I'm not afraid of anything. I accept both the Nitya and the Leela. Nitya here means the eternal. Brahman, the absolute. And the Leela, Divine Mother's play in and as this entire world. He doesn't reject this world as unreal. He says, in many places, he says, why should I only see God with my eyes closed? Why can't I see God with my eyes open? Why can't I see God on my hikes, for instance? That's Sri Ramakrishna. He loved singing a particular song by Ram Prasad, where Divine Mother is depicted as a playful child flying kites, flying hundreds of thousands of kites at the same time. And Sri Ramakrishna says, right before he sings this song, bondage and liberation are both of Divine Mother's making. By her Maya, worldly people become entangled in woman in lust and greed. And again, through her grace, they attain liberation. She is called Savior and the remover of the bondage that binds one to the world. Then Sri Ramakrishna sang the following song in his melodious voice. In the world's busy marketplace, O Shama, meaning Divine Mother, thou art flying kites. High up they soar on the wind of hope, held fast by Maya's string. Their frames are human skeletons. Their sails are of the three gunas made. But all their curious workmanship is merely for ornament. Upon the kite strings thou hast rubbed the manja paste of worldliness, so as to make each straining strand all the more sharp and strong. Out of 100,000 kites, at best but one or two break free. And thou dost laugh and clap thy hands, O Mother, watching them. On favoring winds, says Ram Prasad, the kites set loose will speedily be borne away to the infinite, across the sea of the world. And Sri Ramakrishna explains the song as follows. The Divine Mother is always playful and sportive. This universe is her play. She is self-willed and must always have her own way. She is full of bliss. She gives freedom to 1 out of 100,000. Then somebody asks him, but sir, if she likes, she can give freedom to all. Why then has she kept us bound to the world? Sri Ramakrishna, that is her will. She wants to continue playing with her created beings. In a game of hide and seek, the running about soon stops if in the beginning all the players touch the granny. This is a certain Indian game played by kids. If all touch her, then how can the game go on? That displeases her. Her pleasure is in continuing the game. Therefore, the poet said, out of 100,000 kites, at best but 1 or 2 break free. In another place in the Gospel, though, when Sri Ramakrishna gives this line of reasoning, Hari, the future Swami Turiyanandaji, he gets a little bit troubled. And he says, but mother's play is our death. Is God a sadistic child playing with us and our feelings and our emotions and making us suffer and enjoying it? Then Sri Ramakrishna asks, but who are you? It is Divine Mother who has become everyone, including you, and everything, including the lectern and the chairs and the lights and the iPads. There's nothing but Divine Mother. Why are you opposing yourself to Divine Mother and saying, why is she making me suffer? You are Divine Mother, playing in the form of this person protesting and asking this question. As the snake I bite and as the charmer I cure. That's something that he would often say. Mother is everything. How many of you have heard of the singer, the musician Trevor Hall? Have any of you heard of Trevor Hall's? Yeah, I recently got into his music. I really like it. And one of my favorite songs is Other Ways. Anyone heard of Other Ways? Very few. Okay, you should check it out. A long time ago, there's a music video, he was very young at the time, maybe 19 or 20, I don't know. And he's really channeling everything I've been talking about in this talk, and especially this clown's tumbling theme. Because the first words in the song are, as I walk on down, I feel like a clown in a circus of my own. And before I read more of the lyrics, I want to mention that he's a disciple of Swami Chetananandaji, one of the monks of our order. He's the head of our St. Louis Center, and he's associated with Kali Mandir. So he's a devotee of Mother Kali. Then he says, these are some of the other lyrics in the song. Well, I think about all the other ways I could have played, all the other simple moves I could have made, all the other cards that I could have dealt, all the books I didn't read upon my shelf, all the other ways I could have sung my songs. I've realized that none of it went wrong. It was all play. How could it be any other way? Now that the chains are off, I'm free to roam. Everywhere I go, I feel like I'm home. Nothing hides, everything is shown. She is always with me. I'm never alone. And the music video is beautiful. It almost starts with a picture of his neck, and it has in Sanskrit the word Ma, which means mother, Divine Mother. And the whole music video is him playing with kids in a playground, basically, and just having fun. So that's it. Watch the video. I think you'll really like it. So when you make mistakes, you can think of them as stumbles. That's the lower standpoint that Swami Vivekananda often talks about. They're stumbles. Learn from them, move on. Don't dwell on them. Don't beat yourself up about them. Don't keep pestering or kind of obsessing about what if I hadn't done that? Wouldn't my life have been better if I hadn't done this? It's not healthy. It'll turn you into a basket case. It'll make your life hell. That's why his songs, Other Ways. Everything that happened, good, bad, the ugly, I don't regret any of it. Every single thing that's happened in my life, I'm grateful for because it's made me what I am now. That should be the attitude. Swami Vivekananda, he says the same thing. This is from a lecture called The Goal, delivered in 1900. He says, it is all play. You may say we have to do something, let us do good. But who cares for good and evil? Play. God Almighty plays, that is all. You are the Almighty God playing. If you want to play on the side and take the part of a beggar, you are not to blame someone else for your having made that choice. You enjoy being the beggar. You know your real nature to be divine. You are the king, and play you are a beggar. It is all fun. Know it and play. That is all there is to it. Then practice it. The whole universe is a vast play. All is good because all is fun. This star comes and crashes with our earth and we are all dead. That too is fun. You only think fun, the little things that delight your senses. Do not be miserable. Do not repent. What is done is done. If you burn yourself, take the consequences. Be sensible. We make mistakes. What of that? That is all in fun. They go so crazy over their past sins, moaning and weeping and all that. He's thinking of a lot of these Western Christians that he would be talking to. Do not repent. After having done work, do not think of it. Go on, stop not, don't look back. What will you gain by looking back? You lose nothing, gain nothing. This is one of the keynotes of Swami Vivekananda's teachings. Never say I'm a sinner. It's a standing libel upon human nature to call a human being a sinner. Each one of us as Divine Mother is divine. Each one of us is divine bliss. We have this mine of bliss within us. And we suffer because we don't manifest that bliss. We don't tap into that bliss. All is good because all is fun. It's a wonderful statement. It's a kind of mantra. We can just repeat that. All is good because all is fun. Some questions might come up in this context. I keep saying spiritual life should be fun. But one question that might come up is, well, how do we know that we're having fun in the right way? Because I do talk about how there are different ways of having fun. How do we know that it's not the ego that's having fun? And isn't the point of spiritual life to overcome ego? Again, that's why we have to remind ourselves of this first mantra from the Isha Upanishad. The best way to have fun, the true way to have fun, is to see the divine in everything and in everyone. That's the basis. That's why the first line is Isha vasamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. The precondition for truly having fun is to see the divine in everyone. If you can do that, you can really have fun. And then you might wonder, well, so if we take spiritual life too lightly, if we're not deadly serious about it, then isn't there a danger of becoming complacent, becoming lazy? I don't think that's true at all. Just ask yourselves, when are you most efficient? When are you most hardworking? When have you been the most productive? When you're having the most fun. When I was doing my PhD, I was at Berkeley, and it's 6 years, minimum 6 years. It's an integrated master's PhD. And typically when you get into a PhD program, the university will pay you, they'll fund you, unlike if you just do a master's. And so from the beginning, I thought of it, and I would tell my friends this, the other people in the program, I would say, this is a 6-year paid vacation. Because I loved it, it's fun, they're paying me to study. That was my attitude, and they're furious with me. Because so many of them were complaining all the time about how hard it is and how much reading they have to do and how little they're being paid. And I was like, they're giving me $17,000 a year. That was way back, 2003. So $70,000 a year to read stuff that I love. And I'm having fun. I don't need 1 cent more. So it's all about attitude. It's all about attitude. When you're having fun, you'll be the most sincere, the most productive. I guarantee every single one of you, ask yourselves, when do you do the best work? When you're having the most fun. And that's true of spiritual practice as well. So what does it mean to think of ourselves as clowns tumbling? Just to wrap it up. Vedanta says God, the Divine Mother, is bliss, is fun, is joy. So the best way to express and to manifest our innate divinity is to have fun and to be joyful and always have a smile on our face. That's very important. You should never feel guilty as a spiritual aspirant about laughing and having fun and joking. Second, don't take yourself so seriously and don't take this world so seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself. This is really important. There's a lot of navel-gazing going on these days and becoming self-obsessed, and I think that's one of the root causes of mental health issues like depression and anxiety. We just take ourselves too seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself. How do we as spiritual aspirants deal with our selfish impulses, unwanted thoughts? Again, I think this paradigm of thinking of ourselves as clowns tumbling and everything as mother's plague can really help us. Whenever there's a negative emotion or thought that comes up, don't treat it like an epic battle to the death and beat yourself up and feel bad about it and feel guilty about it. Why am I thinking this thing? Why am I having this feeling? Why? Because you only make that thought or that feeling stronger by turning it into an epic battle and by feeling guilty about it. By worrying and obsessing about it. You only make it stronger. You give it fuel. So what's the better way? Just don't take those thoughts and feelings so seriously. Eckhart Tolle, I gave a talk here actually a while ago on Eckhart Tolle's concept of the pain body. Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now, he talks a lot about a very helpful spiritual practice. And the practice is just to listen to the voice in your head. There's this constant voice chattering away in our head. And he says, just take a step back from it and listen to it. That's a very powerful practice. And then he says, one day you may catch yourself smiling at the voice in your head as you would smile at the antics of a child. That's the attitude. Clowns tumbling. Just don't take it so seriously. Bill Cosby, well, I know it's not PC to talk about him anymore, but back in the, when I was a kid growing up, there was a show that he hosted called Kids Do the Darndest Things. Some of you remember it, I assume. It was a fun show. That's the attitude, is that our thoughts, our feelings, we do the darndest things. Just take a step back and laugh at yourself. Laugh at what, those, you don't have to obsess so much, you don't have to feel so bad. This is what Vedanta teaches, actually. So Gita, chapter 2, verse 70. Puryamanam achala pratishtham samudramapah pravishanti advat. Tadvat kama yam pravishanti sarve sa shantem apnoti na kama kami. That person attains peace, who is like a vast infinite ocean. And when worldly desires, selfish impulses come, they're like these tiny little streams or eddies entering into this vast infinite ocean. Is the ocean bothered? No. It remains completely unaffected and tranquil, equanimous, completely undisturbed, unruffled. That should be the attitude. Also, really important, try to bring some lightness, a kind of childlike lightness into your spiritual life. Spiritual life sometimes becomes heavy, it becomes a drudgery, it becomes mechanical. So remind yourself that Mother herself, Divine Mother herself, is a child playing with us, as us, and that spiritual life is about having fun with her and as her. And then we feel a lightness, we start feeling a lightness. It's really important in spiritual life. So the more childlike we are, the more childlike we become, the closer we come to realizing Divine Mother herself was a divine child. And remember again, guilt and shame, these are not productive in spiritual life. Whatever's past is past. It's really important to move forward, to learn from your mistakes, move forward, not dwell on them, not obsess about them. Even those so-called mistakes and stumbles are just clownish tumbles at the end of the day. That's also part of Mother's play. So let's always try to remember that we're clowns tumbling, that this is all Mother's play. Everything, without exception. It might be easier to think of our good moments, our happy moments, our joyous moments as Mother's play, harder when we're in the midst of anguish, sorrow, when tragedy strikes us. But in all circumstances, at all times, let's try to keep up this attitude that this is Mother's play. And if we keep up this attitude, spiritual life won't be so heavy. It'll become fun. And instead of being so deadly serious, our lives will be blessed. Thank you.